The night in Ukraine was filled with the sounds of alarms and explosions. According to official Ukrainian sources, a new wave of drones hit the country. Strikes and fires were reported in various regions. In the Odessa and Chernihiv regions, the energy infrastructure suffered serious damage. The footage we see shows the scale of what is happening and makes us think about how vulnerable the defense system is becoming. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss such materials and always stay up to date with events. The situation is developing rapidly. European politicians are discussing the possibility of creating a multinational force that could be deployed to Ukraine after the active phase of the conflict ends. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has stated that the massive strikes on cities will be followed by a response. His words came amid discussions of mobilization, which, according to Deputy Head of the Presidential Office Pavlo Polisa, will not stop even in the event of an official ceasefire. This means that the Ukrainian army is preparing for a long confrontation. The headline of this story sounds alarming and sensational. Europe is preparing to intervene. Ukraine is declaring endless mobilization. Russia is launching new strikes on infrastructure facilities. The international conflict is entering a phase where political statements and actual combat operations are intertwined. Let's dive into the details. Over the past few weeks, Russian strikes have increasingly targeted factories and warehouses involved in the production of unmanned aerial vehicles. Overnight, reports came in that facilities involved in the creation and repair of drones had been hit in various parts of Ukraine. Video footage published in the media shows explosions, fires, and rescue operations. These are links in a chain where each event directly affects Ukraine's ability to continue the war using technological methods. Against this backdrop, the transfer of forces to the Kharkiv direction continues. Russian sources report advances in the Zelenoy and Volchansk areas, as well as the use of aviation and artillery. Ukrainian media, on the contrary, publish reports of defense and local successes in Donbas. The situation in these areas is becoming symbolic of the entire war. For Kyiv, it is an opportunity to show resilience and secure the support of its allies. For Moscow, it is a chance to demonstrate that the border will be protected and that a sanitary zone along it will be secured. The historical context adds a particular poignancy to what is happening. Donbas and Kharkiv have always been regions of strategic importance. Industrial centers, important transport hubs, and proximity to the Russian border made them key points on the map. Now every kilometer of land is the subject of fierce fighting. International experts emphasize that it is precisely in these areas that the outcome of the campaign may be decided in the near future. The political context is also complicated. Europe is becoming increasingly involved in discussions about Ukraine's future. The plan to deploy a multinational contingent, as reported by Western media, indicates that the Allies are preparing for a long-term presence. This does not mean direct participation in the fighting now, but it shows an intention to control the situation after it is over. At the same time, discussions on arms supplies continue in the US and NATO countries. Production of missiles for Patriot systems is limited to 600 per year, and 18 countries have such systems in service. Ukraine is in second or even third place. This poses a serious threat, because in the event of new massive attacks, air defense could be depleted. Former Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Valery Zaluzhny, added fuel to the fire by stating that military science is currently concentrated in Russia. His words sparked fierce debate. Some see them as a sober assessment of reality, while others accuse him of undermining morale. But the fact remains. Even at the highest levels, there are acknowledgments that the enemy has serious experience and capabilities. The nighttime drone attack became the #1 topic for Ukrainian and global media. According to official reports, strikes were carried out on targets in several regions. In the Chernihiv region, tens of thousands of people were left without electricity. In the Odessa region, energy facilities were destroyed. And in the Kyiv region, fires were reported. Eyewitnesses say they heard explosions and the roar of engines for several hours. Videos taken on phones show bright flashes in the sky and columns of smoke above residential areas. This is not the first such episode, but its scale has led experts to say that Ukraine's air defense is critically overloaded. Against the backdrop of these attacks, the fate of the Patriot systems is being discussed. Missile stocks are dwindling, and the possibilities for replenishing them are limited. American factories produce about 600 missiles a year, but the queue for deliveries stretches across dozens of countries. Ukraine receives only a fraction of what it needs, and this is reflected in the actual defense of its cities. Russian military analysts openly state that it is precisely the shortage of ammunition that is forcing the Ukrainian side to economize on launches and use the systems only in exceptional cases. This creates a situation where new massive attacks can reach their targets despite the availability of modern technology. Europe's political response is no less important. In recent days, Western media outlets have reported that the European Union is preparing plans to form multinational forces that could be deployed to Ukraine after the active phase of the war ends. So far, this is being discussed as a measure to ensure security and control in the post-war period. However, the very fact that such scenarios are being developed suggests that Brussels is seriously considering a long-term military presence. This is causing concern among experts who point out that any expansion of the Allies' presence could provoke new rounds of tension. The Ukrainian authorities are responding to internal challenges. Deputy head of the presidential office, Pavlo Palisa, has stated outright that mobilization will not stop even in the event of a ceasefire. According to him, the country needs to replace demobilized citizens with new conscripts. This statement has become one of the most discussed. People tired of the war took it as a signal that there is no end in sight to mobilization. Footage is circulating on social media showing military registration office employees forcibly detaining men and taking them away in minibuses. These videos are causing heated debate and increasing anxiety in society. The situation in the Kharkiv region remains tense. Russian sources report advances in the area of Volchansk and the village of Zelenoye. Fighting is taking place there with the use of artillery and aviation. According to reports from Kyiv, Ukrainian units are holding their positions and preparing counterattacks. However, the fact that foreign mercenaries are being brought in suggests that the army is experiencing a shortage of personnel. These units are serving as a temporary backup to prevent breakthroughs on the front line. The historical perspective adds to the intensity of what is happening. The Donetsk and Kharkiv regions have always been strategic regions where interests intersect. Control over them opens up opportunities for maneuver and pressure. Since the beginning of the conflict, these areas have become a symbol of the struggle for survival. Every city and every village has become part of a large chessboard where the future of the country is at stake. Against this backdrop, the words of Valery Zaluzhny, former commander-in-chief of the armed forces of Ukraine, resonate. His statement that all military science is concentrated in Russia had the effect of a bombshell. For many, it sounded like an admission that the enemy had the upper hand. For others, it was merely confirmation of the obvious. Zaluzhny had long spoken of the strength of the Russian command, calling Chief of the General Staff Valery Gerasimov an intelligent and unpredictable opponent. These words now take on a new meaning. Official statements by the parties to the conflict are becoming an important part of the information background. Kyiv continues to focus on local successes, especially in the Donetsk region, where Ukrainian units report the liberation of individual settlements. These statements are intended both for a domestic audience, to maintain morale, and for an external audience, to justify the need for new arms supplies and financial aid. Moscow, in response, claims advances in the Kharkiv region, highlights strikes on warehouses and factories linked to the production of drones, and emphasizes the creation of a security zone along the border. Reports from the Russian Ministry of Defense mention the destruction of enemy artillery, armored vehicles, and manpower. Each of these statements reflects the position that the war will continue until Moscow achieves the goals it considers key to its own security. International analysts note that against the backdrop of the fighting, the technological component of the conflict is increasingly being discussed. The use of unmanned aerial vehicles has become the norm, but in recent weeks, reports of the use of systems with elements of artificial intelligence have attracted attention. Western media outlets are reporting on the emergence of so-called drone swarms, which are capable of acting in sync and performing tasks without constant operator control. This could change the dynamics of combat operations, making them faster and less predictable. The issue of mobilization remains a sensitive topic within Ukraine. Pavel Palisa, deputy head of the president's office, has openly stated that mobilization will continue even if a ceasefire is declared. His words have caused a widespread reaction. To the public, this sounds like an admission that the war will not end anytime soon. For politicians, it is a way to prepare people for the long haul. However, new videos showing the harsh methods used by military registration and enlistment offices are constantly appearing on social media. This undermines trust in the authorities and increases the feeling of tension. The situation on the front lines is complicated. Foreign mercenaries are being transferred to the Kharkiv region to compensate for losses and support the defense. According to Russian sources, the enemy has lost more than 150 personnel, several armored vehicles, and tanks in this region over the past day. The Ukrainian side denies this, but the appearance of foreign units is confirmed by various sources. Meanwhile, the international reaction continues to intensify. The United Nations is calling for humanitarian missions. However, no concrete steps are being taken. Europe is discussing plans to deploy multinational forces after the end of active fighting. The US continues to debate new aid packages. Within Europe, fatigue is growing. Citizens are facing rising energy prices, inflation, and cuts to social programs. Every new statement about continuing support for Ukraine sparks controversy. For some, it is a moral duty. For others, it is an unbearable burden. This divide is becoming increasingly apparent. Against the backdrop of these discussions, Valery Zaluzhny's words that military science is concentrated in Russia have caused a stir. His statement has sparked heated debate in analytical circles. Many experts agree that the experience and strategy of the Russian army remain a significant factor. This admission sounded particularly alarming, given that it came from the former commander-in-chief of the armed forces of Ukraine. When it comes to the future, analysts highlight several possible scenarios. The first scenario is a continuation of positional battles and the gradual exhaustion of both sides. In this case, the front line will remain relatively stable, and the main factors will be the economy and supplies. Limited resources will determine the speed and intensity of operations. Ukraine will depend on arms supplies and financial support from the West. Russia will rely on its own resources and the help of its allies. The second scenario is an attempt at a large-scale offensive by one of the sides. In the case of Ukraine, this would involve a possible counteroffensive in Donbass or the Kharkiv region. This would require fresh forces and equipment, but mobilization is met with resistance from the public, and Western arms supplies are limited. In Russia's case, there could be an attempt to expand the buffer zone along the border and consolidate control over new territories. This option would require significant resources, but could yield tangible results. The third scenario is diplomatic. Calls for negotiations continue to be heard at the United Nations and in certain capitals. However, at the moment, neither side is showing any willingness to compromise. For Kyiv, concessions would mean losing the support of the public and its allies. For Moscow, negotiations are only possible after significant military objectives have been achieved. Therefore, the likelihood of real dialogue in the near future is extremely low. The main factor of uncertainty remains supply. The shortage of missiles for Patriot systems is already limiting Ukraine's ability to defend its cities. Production in the US is not keeping pace with demand. As a result, Ukraine risks facing a situation where massive strikes on infrastructure will cause increasing damage. This could lead to new power outages and disruptions to transport and communications. For the population, this will be yet another ordeal. An equally important factor is the development of technology. Reports of the use of drones with artificial intelligence elements are perceived as an alarming signal. If such systems become widespread, the nature of warfare will change. Experts warn that control over such technologies may prove insufficient, leading to unpredictable consequences. The international community is responding in different ways. In the US, there is fierce debate about continuing financial support. In Europe, public discontent is growing, but the authorities continue to declare solidarity. China and India are taking a wait-and-see approach, using the situation to strengthen their own positions. The UN is discussing new humanitarian missions, but real steps are being postponed. For ordinary people, the forecasts sound like a death sentence. Each of the possible scenarios involves new hardships. In the event of a protracted war, it will mean living under constant attack and evacuation. In the event of an offensive, it will mean further destruction and more refugees. Even the diplomatic option does not mean rapid stabilization, as trust has been destroyed and infrastructure damaged. These forecasts create an atmosphere of anxious anticipation. People understand that the situation is unlikely to improve in the coming months. On the contrary, analysts warn of growing tensions. International media outlets are reporting that the conflict is entering a new dangerous phase. Every statement by politicians and every report from the front lines becomes part of the overall picture, where uncertainty and fear dominate over hope. All the events of recent days paint an alarming picture. Nighttime drone strikes, destroyed energy facilities, tens of thousands of people without light and heat. Ongoing mobilization, which according to the deputy head of the Ukrainian president's office, Pavlo Palisa, will not stop even with a ceasefire. Discussions in Europe about creating a multinational force for a future presence in Ukraine. The words of former Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Valery Zaluzhny, that military science is concentrated in Russia. All this becomes the backdrop against which the international conflict is becoming increasingly dangerous. The main feature of the current stage is that military and political factors are intertwined. On the one hand, the fate of specific cities and regions is being decided on the battlefield. On the other hand, the future of the whole of Europe is being discussed in the offices of Brussels, Washington, and Moscow. Every decision can change the course of events. Every statement influences public opinion and the policies of allies. For Ukraine, the situation remains extremely difficult. The decline in Patriot missile stocks limits the ability to defend cities. The transfer of foreign mercenaries to the Kharkiv direction shows an acute shortage of domestic resources. Mass mobilization is causing discontent among the population. All this suggests that the country is preparing for a long and exhausting confrontation. For Russia, these events are an opportunity to increase pressure and demonstrate resolve. Statements about the creation of a sanitary zone along the border are backed up by military action. Strikes on infrastructure facilities demonstrate the ability to influence Ukraine's vital functions. All this is being used to strengthen positions in international negotiations. The international community is divided. The US and NATO countries continue to declare their support, but doubts and fatigue are growing within these countries. Europe is developing plans for its future presence, but economic difficulties are intensifying within the continent. China and India are using the situation to strengthen their positions without intervening directly. The United Nations is limited to humanitarian initiatives, but cannot offer a political solution. All this suggests that the conflict will continue. The likelihood of a quick end is minimal. More realistic scenarios involve protracted fighting and the gradual exhaustion of the parties. For ordinary people, this means new evacuations, new destruction, and new months of anxiety and uncertainty. This story resembles a long-running series where each episode is filled with tension and pain. The characters change, but the plot remains the same. There are no quick resolutions or easy solutions. All that remains for viewers and participants is to wait for the next twist. We will follow developments and keep you informed about everything that is happening. Subscribe to our channel, like our videos, and leave comments. Support us so that we can continue to show you truthful content and give a voice to those who find themselves at the epicenter of the conflict.